Mage Storytime, Episode 5. We Know Talk Good. This is the continuing story of the Iron Goldfish, a party of role-players who awakened as mages. Our cast includes Alwi, who manipulates time with his phone; Baker, who distills powerful potions into delicious baked treats; Bard, a mind and spirit mage who uses superheroes as his gods; Critical, who improves the luck of others through his own pain; Handy, a correspondence-using thief who steals items at long range; Talo, a postmodern mage who uses a hodgepodge of skills to manipulate forces and matter; and Weeb, who uses his life skills to enhance his martial arts and Chinese medicine. When last our heroes met, we were introduced to the trickster god Coyote and ran an errand for him, making friends with him in the process. Flush with success, we decided to continue looking at nodes and trying to expand our Rolodex. Our long-term goal was to dispose of the Bane spirits in the mall near our new storefront, but only a few of us could even see spirits, let alone hurt them, so we had to figure out some way around our deficiencies. During the week between our meetings, Bard and Critical began researching the Celestial Chorus, one of the 9 traditions of magic, and trying to figure out where they might be located. We figured it was a good idea to make friends, and maybe we could learn something. Weeb and Talo got to work on a set of steampunk-style goggles that would allow the wearer to see spirits, in preparation for our conflict with the Banes. Alwi received the prototype pair, and when he put them on, he saw the spirits of his deceased relatives. The look on their faces told him that they had watched him alone, at night, when he was enjoying his personal time. The shame and the horror they radiated was too much, and he whipped the goggles off his head. "Yeah, they work," was all he would say. Baker returned for a brief while. In the small respite running the bakery left her. We informed her about what we had been up to. She was grossed out by the worm, until we explained that it was spelled with a Y, and therefore was more like a dragon. That didn't bother her so much. She in turn gave a report about our prisoner Marco. Apparently he was doing well carrying bags of flour and opening jars and such in her shop, and he seemed to be recovering nicely. The spiked lavender cookies she had been feeding him no doubt helped, we were all certain. Alwi worked on growing the koi and planned to store them for display and sale in our mall shop. We made him stop on the grounds that selling Bane-possessed fish to innocent customers would be bad for business and humanity. On the topic of Bane spirits, we had several brainstorming sessions about them. It occurred to us that they were agents or creatures of the worm, and, having looked up the worm in our official resource, read World of Darkness RPG books, we figured out that the werewolves hated it. So we thought that teaming up with the werewolves running around White Rock Lake might be a way to gain allies, and learn more about how to fight the Bane spirits. Or, better yet, get someone to do it for us. Not really knowing how werewolves worked, we weren't sure if we should wait for a full moon, or a new moon, or somewhere in between. We checked the White Wolf books about werewolves, but it was hard to parse the truth from fiction. We finally settled on waiting for the waning moon when they might be weaker, we guessed. Also, given its effect on dogs, we brought some chocolate along as self-defense. We arrived around late afternoon/early evening, bringing a hefty supply of Tello's homebrew with us to enhance the picnic feeling. The hill was covered in a smooth, rolling meadow with stands of juniper trees dotted around the whole thing, obscuring the top from the major thoroughfare below. Once again, the node was not difficult to find. Near where we parked stood a copse of oak trees, all bent and distorted. Instead of growing straight up, they grew out such that their trunks ran nearly parallel to the ground, creating natural benches. The 4 trees radiated away from the node which stood at their center, almost like a blast frozen in time. We set up our picnic area and did our best to keep an eye out for wolves, and dogs or other canines as well. Talo and Bard, as they scouted around the hill, saw several large furry shapes moving through the underbrush. They seemed too big for critters that belonged in a city, so we put the group on alert. We decided to set a trap for the werewolves. Specifically, we put a nice steak sandwich, prepared by Baker, on a plate with a cold beer and set a cardboard box over it, held up by a stick with a small string attached. We figured anything dumb enough to fall for it wasn't actually a werewolf, and the real deal would be too busy laughing at us to attack. There actually was a plan behind this. If the werewolves thought we were complete idiots, then they probably wouldn't see us as a threat, and we might be able to have a peaceful conversation. Of course, there was also the possibility that they would be horribly insulted and kill us on the spot. But to be fair, it amused us, and many a mighty wizard's last words have been, "Worth it." So, if we died horribly, we would be in good company. To complete the scene, Alwi perched himself atop one of the tree trunks, about a foot off the ground, and crouched into a vulture-like pose, hovering over the sandwich trap while he sang, "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious." The rest of us based ourselves some distance away, reading books and hanging out, and pretended that we didn't know the crazy man on the tree. It was a few hours before anything happened, but we had plenty of beer to keep entertained. Around 11 that evening, we started to hear movement and saw shapes darting about. After a few minutes of intense watching, we were able to identify 6 wolves who were moving in concert toward the node and our location. As we watched, one of the wolves ran into a copse of junipers, and a few moments later, a person stepped out. It could possibly have been 2 separate creatures who happened to move through the same stand of juniper trees, but anyone on the watch for werewolves would have immediately recognized what just happened. The man started walking up the hill, causing Alwi, and now Weeb, to increase the volume of their song. "Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious." This caused the man some apparent consternation as he stopped and gawked at the old concealed trap set up before him. Shaking his head and gritting his teeth, he approached and asked, "So, what you doing? You clowns just like to hang out in parks in the middle of the night quoting sitcoms?" "We're, hunting for hobos," replied Alwi. His reply only garnered a stunned silence from the stranger. None of us were able to hold it together after that, and the werewolf stood and stared confusedly as we all broke up laughing. "Okay, I'm gonna level with you," said Alwi. "I may have had a few edibles while we were waiting for you, but we mean you no harm. We just wanted some advice, and maybe some help, so we brought you the sandwich as a peace offering." "I don't know. Something about the sandwich looks like a trap." "Maybe it's the trap part," the werewolf responded. By now the rest of us had started to drift over. No, said Weeb. "We're showing our hands so you know it's safe. That BS is the trap, so you can tell we're harmless." We told him that we were just looking to talk to some werewolves to get help dealing with bane spirits. The werewolf, for such he was, looked at us like we had gone even crazier. "You're looking for what? You guys know werewolves are fake, right?" In response, Weeb conjured a ball of fire in his hand and simply said, "Bro." Or he tried to, but the edibles had started to hit him as well, so mostly he just stood there with his hand out. When the man shot him a questioning glance, Weeb remembered himself and activated the magic. "Awi, look, we just want to fight the worm." "I'm sorry, what? Who are you people again?" "Baker, we're the Iron Goldfish." "Iron Goldfish. I would comment about finding a better name that strikes fear into the hearts of your enemies, but that seems pretty on brand for you. It conveys stupidity and danger at the same time." Weeb, "Yeah, we basically formed our own group because no one else would have us." "I can't imagine why. You were saying about the worm?" Awi, "Yeah, screw that guy." "Okay, without admitting to anything, if there hypothetically was a worm, yeah, screw that guy. So really, who are you or what are you?" Awi, "Well, we're a group of mages who..." When he said mages, the temperature of the Texas spring night got noticeably colder. Metaphorically, I mean. In real life, it was still hot as hell. We saw the man's hackles visibly rise as he spat the word, "corruptors." At the same time, we heard a chorus of howls from the bushes. We were suddenly very interested in just being normal weirdos. "Look," Weeb said, "we come in peace and bring steak and beer. We're not here to steal your node, we just want to talk. We're friends with the Cairn at the comic shop up north, if you've heard about that." Unfortunately for us, it appeared that werewolves and werebears didn't run in the same social circles. Moreover, as Baker tried to bring the sandwich over to appease the angry wolfman, she managed to trip and throw the juicy meal right in his face, where it stuck briefly, sliding off with a slurp sound. Critical ran forward to try to help, and likewise tripped and slammed face first into the werewolf's chest. In an act of inhuman restraint, the werewolf didn't just kill us outright. Instead, he stood there, steam almost visibly coming off his head as sandwich dripped off his face. I am done with this stupid shit, he said as he started to stretch and grow. We were all already intimidated, but apparently there was something magical about this transformation because we could all feel a mystic, psychic wave of fear coming off of him. Baker started gibbering about a bear and had to be briefly restrained from terrified flight. None of us ran screaming into the distance, but it was a near thing. He reached improbable height and size, and then kept going. His hair covered his body. His muscles twisted and warped, and huge fangs and glowing eyes became the most prominent features of his face. Then 5 more stood up on the hill behind him. Through a mouth of spittle, he snarled, "Go away, little corruptors. Thank your gods that you aren't dead, but fuck off now." And like that, off was swiftly fucked. All we left behind was a dust cloud and the beers, as a parting gift / distraction. Having narrowly escaped with our lives, we decided we needed to know more about werewolves, so we turned to the Werewolf the Apocalypse books, hoping they would prove useful. Then we went and talked to James the Werebear, who was a lot more succinct. As best we could figure, werewolves saw themselves as guardians of nature, and viewed mages as people who twisted nature and natural resources to their own ends. Sort of like how an environmentalist would view a lumber company. We were using up and destroying their natural world. We resolved that we would operate more carefully with the werewolves in future, given what big eyes they had, and what big teeth and claws they had, and what squishy organs we had. We were informed, in fact, that we had done fairly well and must have been at least somewhat persuasive, just because we had survived the encounter. We didn't tell James that it was probably because we were too stupid to be bothered with. The Iron Goldfish will drag you down to our level and beat you with experience. We also learned that a lot of packs had spirit totems, which, given our success with Coyote and our own allied spirits, could potentially be an avenue of contact. With that in mind, several of us spent the next week hanging around Coyote's node, cleaning up, bringing him booze and porn, mostly because he thought us having to bring it to a public garden was hilarious, and otherwise sucking up to the trickster god. Once we had sufficiently buttered him up, we started talking to him about totem spirits. He told us that he typically worked with were-coyotes. Also, were-coyotes were apparently a thing. But he did know a few spirits that might act as totems, and he would be willing to put us in touch with them. We told Coyote about the 2 nodes outside of Dallas that we were looking at. He knew that there were packs associated with both of them, but only knew about one totem spirit. Rat, totem of the Bone Gnawers. Coyote described him as an interesting character, which, coming from a trickster, could mean just about anything. Coyote claimed to like him because he represented stealth, guile, and dirty fighting, all of which spoke to the trickster. After offering tribute and payment in the form of a particularly vile story from one of our previous D&D campaigns, involving a bird woman with a second set of teeth, otherwise referred to as cloaca dentata, the dirty old god was willing to open a gate for us to the spirit world. He pointed us towards a particular path through the spirit woods, telling us to take it to the edge of the forest, where we would meet a totem spirit. Hopefully Rat would then put in a good word for us with the pack in Frisco. We wandered through the forest, which we were informed was essentially the embodiment of Gaia, where all the nature-related spirits hung out. Tello was especially freaked out, as it resembled the woods from her awakening, where horrible creatures had tried to eat her. She couldn't say it was the exact same place, mostly because of the lack of said people trying to eat her, but that could always change. We didn't exactly know what we were looking for, but we were told we would recognize it when we saw it. After a while, the trees started to thin, and we could see the local environment beginning to shift from forest to plains. Just past the edge of the trees, we saw a gigantic city looming. Not only was it gigantic in the sense of having a lot of buildings, but as we approached, we began to see that it was literally made for giants, apparently. Critical was afraid at first that we were becoming rats, and thus seeing the world from a rat's perspective, but none of us felt any urges for cheese, and we all looked normal, so we continued on. We found out later that this was essentially the mythic equivalent of the city, whatever city that may be, the quintessence of human habitation and communal civilization. Not wanting to see what kinds of things lived in 100-foot-tall houses, we gave the city as wide a berth as we could. As we tracked around the outskirts, we started looking for places Rat would gather. None of us wanted to try the city, even though we couldn't hear or feel any giants around. So we kept walking until we rounded a corner and saw an enormous, though proportionally sized, garbage heap. It didn't take us too long to find a gigantic, or us-sized, rat scurrying about the midden heap, who stood on his hind legs and addressed us.
Halt! Who trespasses in my domain? Squeak!
Handy. We're the Iron Goldfish. We're friends of Coyote.
Friends of Coyote? What kinds of friends? Squeak! The kinds he sends to borrow money, or the kinds he sends to get horribly killed because he thinks that's funny?
Tello. I'm pretty sure we're more amusing alive than dead. We're having issues, and he sent us to talk to you. Specifically, we're looking at a node, and the Guardians are apparently your followers.
Why would you need to talk to them? Are you after the node? Squeak.
Weep. More that we need help fighting some Bane spirits, and we thought your followers might be able to help us deal with them, since we're fighting the worm.
Oh, and he wants me to give you a letter of introduction? I understand now. Why should I? Squeak.
Weep. Well, what do you want? We can bring sacrifices. How about an assortment of aged cheeses?
A, that's a stereotype and that's hurtful. B, that sounds delicious. Maybe some nice wine to go with it? Squeak. Sounds pretty good. Squeak. My followers are fine and all, but raw meat's more their thing.
Tello. Well, we've got stuff, and we have time magic, so we can magically age the wine to perfection.
You have my attention. That explains why I should help you. Maybe. But why should I think that you have what it takes to help my people?
Tello. Well, we did steal a scale from the worm.
I'm sorry, you what now? I must have had some crazy in my ear.
We told Rat the story of our cleverness in talking one of the worm's servants into stealing the scale for us, and he was suitably impressed. That was enough to convince the spirit. We gave him the details about our location and what pack we needed help with, and as we talked, he reached into a pile of nearby garbage, pulled out a manila folder, and started flipping through it.
Let's see. Motorplane, Texas, squeak. Ah, here we go. Oh.
So saying, he pulled out a page with a flourish and presented it to us.
This will act as a letter of introduction from me, and I'll reach out through spiritual means to let the Bone Gnawers know you're coming. They've been having trouble north of your area with the worm, or at least one of his human agents. What we're pretty sure is a subsidiary of Pintex just put in a large convenience store. Squeak. Maybe something to do with the beaver? And the wolves are trying to get their node back from it.
Having received the letter and a mission, we made our goodbyes, pleased at having made a new friend. We were both surprised at our success and a little concerned that we could have only apparently get along with abstract spirits. Still, we decided to take our wins where we could get them. All we could hope is that the Bone Gnawers would be at least as restrained as the werewolves we had met, and that they could be convinced not to eat us on principle. Will the Iron Goldfish survive their next werewolf encounter? What new friends will they make? And who will they offend next? Find out in the next Mage Storytime.